A wounded police officer lay trapped beneath a wrecked SUV, bleeding into the snow as a blizzard raged around him. He was out of signal, out of strength, and nearly out of time. His breath fogged the cold air as he whispered a final prayer for mercy. Miles away, a retired Special Forces captain and her loyal K9 were following a faint distress beacon when the dog suddenly stopped, ears up, eyes fixed toward the storm. What happened next would shake the entire town of Silver Ridge and prove that even in the darkest winter, God's light still finds its way home. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more soulful stories. The storm moved across Silver Ridge, Montana, like a living breath, slow, endless, and white. Snow fell in thick, swirling sheets that erased the horizon and muffled every sound, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. At the base of a frozen ravine, a police SUV lay on its side, its emergency lights flashing weakly through the fog. Inside, Officer Noah Briggs stirred, his breath shallow and uneven. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of his left shoulder, dark against the blue of his uniform. He was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, with a square jaw now marked by a fading scar, an old reminder of a warehouse explosion that had claimed his partner 5 years ago. His eyes, a pale gray, carried that memory like a permanent shadow. He had been known among his peers as reliable, quiet, a man who followed the rules but had stopped believing they always saved people. Tonight, trapped under the steering column with pain pulsing through his arm, he couldn't remember the last time he'd prayed. His radio was shattered, his phone useless. Only the snow answered, falling in relentless silence. The storm had worsened faster than predicted. He had been following a report of a stranded truck carrying hazardous material from Frostline Industries, but the winding mountain road had vanished under a blanket of ice. The SUV had skidded, rolled twice, and landed upright only by luck. Now luck had run out. His breath fogged the glass, and through it he saw nothing. Only the white swirl of snow and the faint orange pulse of his dashboard light. He checked his sidearm. 1 bullet. For a moment, the cold logic of despair crossed his mind. Better his choice than the storm's. But something deep inside refused. Maybe it was duty or stubbornness or just the voice of the dead partner who once said, "You don't quit until the world tells you to stop breathing." Miles away, a figure moved steadily along the ridge path. Captain Ava Delaney, 35, was used to the cold, to isolation, and to silence. She had the build of a soldier, tall, lean, and purposeful. Her dark auburn hair was tied back under a black knit cap, and her skin, pale against the frost, glowed faintly in the reflection of her headlamp. She had the kind of presence that drew stillness around her, as if even the storm hesitated before touching her. Ava had spent a decade in special operations before transferring to law enforcement. She carried herself with the composure of someone who had seen war and found it both senseless and necessary. After Afghanistan, she had learned to move with precision, to trust instinct over noise, to listen to what the world whispered beneath chaos. Tonight she wasn't on duty. She had driven north from town to check the power lines near an old ranger station, her father's former post before retirement. Her only company was Ranger, her 9-year-old German shepherd. Ranger was large even for his breed, with thick fur streaked in. Black and silver, amber eyes bright and alert. Age had given him a calm confidence, the kind of presence that spoke of experience. He had served with Ava during her final military deployment, saved her life more than once, and bore a faint scar across his muzzle as proof of devotion. Though officially retired, he still moved like a soldier, silent, precise, and ready. Ava's boots crunched against the ice as she climbed higher along the ridge. The wind howled in fits, carrying snow sideways across the path. Ranger halted suddenly, body stiff, ears pricked forward. His tail rose, not in excitement but in alarm. Ava froze, following his gaze into the storm. For a long moment, she heard nothing but wind, until a sound emerged faintly beneath it, the rhythmic, dying pulse of a siren. She narrowed her eyes. The noise was distant, muffled, but unmistakable. A police vehicle, alone. "Easy, boy," she murmured, resting a gloved hand on Ranger's shoulder. The dog gave a low growl, then whined softly, turning his head toward the east. Ava exhaled, a cloud of vapor escaping her lips. Something inside her shifted. The instinct that never left her since combat, the sense of urgency when another life was hanging by a thread. The descent into the ravine was steep and treacherous. Snow hid the rocks beneath, and the slope dropped off sharply into darkness. Ava crouched low, scanning the valley below. A faint, intermittent glow pulsed through the white haze, red and blue, distorted by snowfall. Her heartbeat quickened. She pressed 2 fingers to Ranger's collar. "Stay close." As they moved down the ridge, her mind worked in fragments. Frostline, a remote patrol, the storm that came too early. Something about the pattern felt wrong. A memory flashed, her father's voice when she was a child teaching her the rules of the mountains. In Silver Ridge, the snow hides truth as well as danger. At the bottom, she found the SUV half buried in drifted snow, its hood bent, windows fractured. Steam hissed faintly from the engine. Ava circled once, assessing. No movement. Then Ranger barked, a deep, controlled bark, signaling life inside. She yanked open the driver's door. The man inside blinked against the sudden rush of cold air. Blood stained the seat. His face was pale, angular, with the stubble of 2 days' beard and eyes that spoke exhaustion more than fear. "I'm Captain Ava Delaney," she said, voice steady despite the wind. "Can you move?" He tried, grimaced, and shook his head. "Shoulders hit, radio's dead." Ranger pushed his head into the opening, sniffing, then looked up at Ava with the faintest growl. Not danger, but urgency. Ava tore a strip from her scarf and pressed it against the wound, tightening it with professional ease. "You're lucky," she said, glancing around. Another hour, and the snow would have buried this whole ravine. Noah let out a rough laugh that turned into a cough. "Lucky's not the word I'd use." "Then use this one. Alive." She met his gaze, and for a second, the storm faded. There was something in her tone, quiet command wrapped in compassion, the kind that made soldiers follow without question. He studied her through the pain. She looked like someone who belonged in motion, not standing still, a woman forged by structure and solitude. Her presence steadied him more than the bandage. Outside, Ranger barked again, turning sharply toward the west. Ava looked up, senses flaring. The dog's posture had changed, ears locked forward, tail stiff. It wasn't his all-clear stance. It was the alert of threat. "What is it, Ranger?" she whispered. The dog growled low, his gaze fixed on the ridgeline above them. Ava followed his line of sight and caught a brief glimmer of light through the snow. A reflection, too clean to be natural, the kind she'd seen through the scope of a rifle. Her pulse slowed. "Someone's up there." Noah frowned weakly. "You think it's rescue?" Ava shook her head once. "No, that's a shooter's glint." She drew her pistol, checked the chamber, and leaned close to him. "Stay down. Whatever happens, don't move until I say." Ranger's growl deepened. The snow thickened, falling faster now, cloaking the ravine in white silence once again. Somewhere beyond that curtain, a shape shifted. Too still, too deliberate. Ava pressed her shoulder against the SUV, eyes locked on the ridge. "Whoever you are," she murmured under her breath, "you picked the wrong night." And then, through the storm, came the faint metallic click of a bolt being drawn back. Snow whipped across the ravine, blurring shapes into ghostly outlines. The wind shrieked through the pines like a warning from the mountain itself. Captain Ava Delaney pressed her back to the overturned SUV, breath shallow, gun raised, eyes scanning the ridge. Her pulse slowed into the rhythm she'd learned long ago: control the fear, isolate the sound. K9 Ranger crouched low beside her, his thick fur bristling with tension, teeth bared just enough to glint white under the flashlight's dying beam. The click she'd heard a moment before echoed again, metal against frost. A rifle bolt being pulled into place. On the ridge above, a faint silhouette moved. Ava leaned closer to the frozen ground, her instincts tightening. Whoever it was, they had a vantage point, a plan, and patience. This wasn't random. "Stay," she whispered to Ranger, and the dog obeyed instantly, pressing himself against the snow. Inside the SUV, Officer Noah Briggs shifted painfully, pressing one hand to his wound. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes unfocused. Through the window, he could just make out Ava's dark outline framed against the snow, still and sharp like a statue carved from iron and resolve. There was something about the way she moved, disciplined, deliberate, that made him trust her without question. A sharp flash tore through the storm. A bullet slammed into the SUV's side mirror, spraying shards of glass across Noah's lap. "Sniper!" Ava shouted, ducking as another shot rang out. She felt the impact tremor through the metal. "He's targeting the vehicle, not us," she muttered to herself. "Trying to flush us out." She crawled along the snowbank toward the rear, her mind racing. A professional wouldn't waste shots. He was baiting them, predicting movement. Ava's gaze caught something glinting faintly near the rocks, a spent casing half buried in snow, large caliber, military grade. Whoever he wasn't a common criminal. She tapped her radio, only static. The storm drowned all signals. She looked at Noah, then at the dog. "We can't stay here," she said. "He's got range and we don't." Noah's voice was hoarse. "You think he's part of Frostline?" Ava nodded grimly. "Maybe, or someone paid by them." She looked toward the north, where the mountain curved into a narrow channel. "We move along the creek bed. He can't hit what he can't see." Ranger barked once, low and urgent, as if agreeing. Ava helped Noah out of the SUV, his weight sagging against her. The contact startled her, his body heavy but warm despite the cold, the faint scent of blood and snow mixed in the air. "Easy," she said. "We'll make it." They moved together, crouched low, Ranger leading ahead. The snow fell thicker now, softening every sound but the crunch of their boots. Each step was agony for Noah, his injured shoulder throbbing with each breath. Ava stole quick glances at him, even wounded. His eyes stayed alert, scanning their path. There was grit in him, an old kind, born from disappointment and survival. Above them, another figure watched through the scope. The sniper, a man named Glenn Varner, late 40s, unshaven, his breath misting in the freezing air, adjusted his position. He wore a white camouflage coat and had a rugged face weathered by years of mercenary work. Once a soldier, now a hired gun. He had the calm detachment of someone who'd long traded morality for paychecks. Frostline Industries had hired him 2 months ago after environmental protests turned violent. His orders tonight were simple: remove evidence. He didn't know who the targets were, and he didn't care until he saw the dog. Through his scope, he recognized the German Shepherd's disciplined gait, the precise movement of its handler. He exhaled slowly. "Special Forces," he muttered under his breath. "This just got complicated." Back below, Ava found a narrow trench carved by an old stream. "Down here," she ordered. They slid into the hollow, sheltered from direct sight. She pressed her hand against Noah's chest to keep him low. The contact sent a jolt through her she didn't expect. "You're burning up," she said softly. "Adrenaline," he grunted, half smiling. "And maybe faith." Her lips curved faintly despite the situation. "Then keep both alive." They huddled against the slope while the wind howled overhead. Ava's mind flashed back to Afghanistan, to another night when she'd been pinned under fire with her team. She remembered the moment her commanding officer had fallen and the silence that followed. Since then, she'd carried that silence with her, never allowing emotion to breach the armor she built around herself. But here, under the same storm in a different land, that silence cracked. This man beside her wasn't her comrade, wasn't her mission. He was something more immediate, more human. Ranger growled softly. Ava froze. The dog's gaze pointed toward the ridge, movement again, faint but deliberate. "He's repositioning," she whispered. "He knows we moved." "We can't outrun a sniper," Noah said. "What's the plan?" Ava's eyes narrowed. "We distract him long enough to change the equation." She looked at Ranger. "You remember the signal, boy?" The dog wagged his tail once, an acknowledgement of understanding. Ava touched his collar, her gloved fingers brushing the old military tag still attached. "Ranger, K9 271. She took a breath, then gave the command. "Go, flank." Ranger sprinted into the snow, vanishing almost instantly in the whiteout. A few seconds later, the sniper heard barking echoing from his left. He turned the rifle, scanning, searching for the dark blur moving between trees. Ava saw the faint rotation of the barrel and seized the moment. "Now," she whispered, pulling Noah with her toward a line of boulders. They stumbled behind cover just as another shot whistled past, striking the rock and sending up a spray of ice. Ava pressed Noah down, heart hammering. "He's losing patience," she said. "And we're losing options," Noah replied, voice strained but steady. Before she could answer, Ranger appeared again, silent this time, emerging from the opposite direction, a dark ghost in the snow. He had circled wide, just as he'd been trained. Ava raised her gun, watching for the glint again. Nothing. The ridge was still, too still. Then came a sound not from above but behind them, the crunch of boots on frozen earth. Ava swung around, aiming. A man stepped into view from behind a snow-laden pine, tall and wrapped in white tactical gear, rifle slung low. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes cold and calculating. "Lower the weapon," he said calmly. His voice was rough, the kind that carried no threat because it didn't need to. "You're outnumbered." "Outnumbered?" Ava asked, steadying her aim. "I only see one dead man standing." He smiled thinly. "You'll see more soon enough." The storm howled again, erasing the horizon in white. Ranger growled, muscles coiled to strike. Ava's finger tightened on the trigger, but something flickered in the man's expression. Not arrogance, but recognition. "You're Delaney," he said slowly, realization dawning. "The one who—" The rest of his words were drowned by the echo of a distant explosion rolling across the valley like thunder. Ava and Noah exchanged a quick glance. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't part of their plan. The storm had swallowed the world whole. Snow whirled like shards of broken glass under the thin beam of Ava's flashlight as she half-dragged, half-carried Officer Noah Briggs through the endless white. His weight pressed heavily against her back, each step sinking deep into the drifts. His uniform was soaked, blood mixing with melted frost, staining her gloves crimson. K-9 Ranger moved ahead, his silver-black fur dusted white, nostrils flaring as he guided them through the pine forest. Every few moments he turned to check on them, amber eyes glinting with concern and intelligence. Ava's breath came in visible bursts. She had tied a makeshift bandage around Noah's shoulder using the inner lining of her coat, but the wound still bled slowly, a stubborn pulse of red against all that white. "Stay awake," she ordered, her voice low but firm. "Talk to me, Noah." He groaned faintly. You always boss people around like this?" She huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "Only the ones bleeding to death on my watch." When they finally reached a clearing, Ava spotted the faint outline of an old structure half buried in snow. Silver Ridge Ranger Station, long abandoned since an avalanche 15 years earlier. Its roof sagged under the weight of ice, windows shattered, but it was shelter. She pushed the door open with her shoulder, the hinges creaking like something alive. Inside, the air was musty and cold, carrying the scent of wood rot and time. A collapsed cot leaned against the far wall, and a cast-iron stove sat crookedly in the corner. She eased Noah down onto the cot, his face pale beneath the flicker of her flashlight. "You're lucky this place still stands," she murmured. "Define lucky," he whispered with a crooked smile, eyes half closed. Ranger padded in after her, shaking off snow, then disappeared into the dark corner of the room. A moment later, the dog reappeared, something metallic glinting between his teeth. Ava knelt, prying it gently from his jaw, a compact GPS tracker, the Frostline Industries logo etched into its casing. She turned it over, her brows furrowing. Noah's gaze sharpened despite the haze of pain. That's from the truck I was chasing," he said hoarsely. "Their shipment route, chemical waste, illegal dumping near the waterline. I caught them last night. Then the road went dark." Ava's mind raced. Frostline. She had heard whispers about them for years. A corporation hiding its pollution under the snow, bribing officials to look away. Her father had once warned her before his retirement, some mines bury more than minerals. She tossed the GPS aside, pulling off her gloves. "You shouldn't even be alive." Noah gave a weak chuckle that turned into a cough. "I guess I'm stubborn. Comes with the badge." Her eyes softened despite herself. "Or maybe someone up there decided you still have work to do." She struck a match and held it to the dry kindling Ranger had dragged in. The fire caught slowly, the flame a fragile heartbeat against the dark. Warmth spread through the small room, tinting their faces gold. Ava pulled off her coat and draped it over him. Without her heavy jacket, the outline of her athletic frame showed through, the kind of strength built from years of carrying more than just gear, grief, command, and silence. Her dark auburn hair had come loose, a strand falling across her cheek as she checked his pulse again. Tell me about you, Noah said softly, breaking the quiet. You don't sound like a local ranger. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. Special Forces, before I switched badges. Thought I'd left the war behind, but looks like it followed me home. He nodded slowly, watching her in the flickering light. You fight different battles now. Ava stared into the fire, her expression unreadable. Sometimes I'm not sure which ones are worse. Ranger shifted closer to the warmth, resting his massive head on Noah's knee. The dog exhaled deeply, a sound like relief. Noah's uninjured hand moved to scratch behind his ear. He's something else, he murmured. Yeah, Ava said softly. He saved my life once. Kandahar, 2015. Our convoy hit an IED. He pulled me out of the wreck before the fire reached the ammo crates, lost half his hearing in one ear. Noah looked down at the shepherd, eyes thoughtful. Guess we both owe him then. Ava smiled faintly, then reached into her pack for her small medical kit. I'll owe you stitches if you move, she warned, cleaning his wound with steady precision. Her fingers brushed his skin and he winced, but didn't pull away. You've done this before, he said, watching her work. Too many times, she murmured. Field medicine was half my job. As she wrapped the final bandage, Noah caught her wrist lightly, his touch gentle but deliberate. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming back for me. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Outside, the storm howled against the roof, but inside, there was only the soft crackle of fire and the sound of their breathing. Ava met his gaze, the gray in his eyes reflecting the flame like molten silver. She felt something stir, deep and unexpected, beneath the armor she had spent years forging. She withdrew her hand slowly, clearing her throat. Rest. That's an order. He smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears pricking. Ava froze. The dog's body went rigid, eyes fixed on the door. Then came the faint crunch of footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. Ava reached for her sidearm, motioning Noah to stay quiet. Through a crack in the wood, she saw a flicker of movement. A man, heavy coat dusted white, rifle slung over his shoulder. The same glint she had seen on the ridge. Her pulse quickened. She whispered to Ranger, Guard. The dog slipped silently toward the door, muscles tensed. Ava took position beside the window, peering out. The figure came closer, stepping into the faint firelight leaking from the cracks. His face was half hidden by a scarf, but she recognized the eyes, sharp, cold, and gray. Glenn Varner, the sniper. He was searching, sweeping the perimeter. He hadn't seen them yet. Ava turned to Noah, whispering, He followed us. Noah gritted his teeth, pushing himself upright. We have to move. Not yet, she said. We wait for him to make a mistake. Varner stopped outside the door, his hand reaching for the handle. Inside, Ava steadied her breath, finger on the trigger. Ranger growled low, ready to spring. The handle turned, then stopped. From the darkness outside came another sound, the sharp crunch of boots approaching from the opposite direction. 2 sets this time. Varner turned his head, scanning the tree line. A faint voice called out through the wind, deep and commanding. Hold your fire! Identify yourself! Ava's heart leapt. Reinforcements or another trap? Varner stepped back, rifle raised, scanning the storm. Ava leaned closer to the frosted window, straining to see. 3 men emerged from the snow, one carrying a lantern, the others in sheriff's uniforms. Deputy Carter Hale, mid-50s, grizzled and broad with a trimmed silver beard, and Deputy Lena Ortiz, a young Latina officer barely 30, sharp-eyed, clutching a shotgun tight. Sheriff's Department, Hale barked. Drop the weapon! Varner hesitated only a moment before the rifle turned, not toward them, but toward the cabin. Ava's blood ran cold. Down! She hissed. The next instant, gunfire split the night. The world returned to Noah in fragments. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, the faint antiseptic tang of disinfectant, and the muffled whine of wind against frosted windows. His body ached in 100 places, but the pain in his shoulder was now a dull echo instead of a scream. When he forced his eyes open, the dim light of dawn filtered through a small hospital window. The storm had passed, leaving the town of Silver Ridge buried under a pristine white silence. Beside his bed sat Captain Ava Delaney, slumped forward in a metal chair, her head resting on folded arms. Her dark auburn hair was undone, falling messily over her face. Her uniform, heavy navy blue with tactical shoulder pads, was streaked with mud and snow, the dried marks of a night that refused to fade. She looked utterly exhausted, her features softened by sleep, the rigid professionalism replaced by quiet vulnerability. At the foot of the bed lay Ranger, curled like a sentinel. His thick fur rose and fell with slow breaths, one ear twitching now and then. Even in rest, he radiated alertness. Noah's throat was dry, but his voice still carried a faint smile. "Guess you weren't kidding when you said I'd make it." Ava stirred, startled awake. For a moment she blinked, disoriented, then broke into a small, relieved laugh. "You're a terrible patient," she said, voice hoarse but warm. "Most people stay unconscious when told to rest." "I've never been good at following orders," he replied. She reached over to adjust his IV line. "That much I've learned." Before either could say more, a faint beep came from the nightstand. The GPS device Ranger had retrieved earlier, the one bearing the Frostline Industries insignia, had powered itself on. Its cracked screen glowed pale blue in the dark room, displaying a single pulsing word: inbound. Beneath it, coordinates flickered, leading straight toward the Frostline mine on the outskirts of Silver Ridge. Ava straightened instantly, the soldier in her waking up again. "They're moving something," she said. "Or someone." Before Noah could respond, the door opened and a tall figure stepped in. Captain Elias Delaney, Ava's father and the sheriff of Silver Ridge. He was in his early 60s, still broad-shouldered beneath his winter coat, his once black hair now iron gray. His weathered face carried years of command, and his eyes, the same sharp blue as his daughter's, flickered with concern beneath the brim of his hat. He spoke with the calm authority of a man who had seen the world collapse and still found ways to rebuild it. "The storm's not done," he said. "Another front's moving in tonight, but if that GPS is active, Frostline's cleaning house before it hits." Ava rose. "They'll destroy everything. The waste, the proof, maybe the workers too. We can't let that happen." Elias studied her for a long moment. "You've been running on fumes for 24 hours. "Then it's a good thing adrenaline doesn't freeze," she replied, already pulling on her coat. The older man sighed, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "You get that from your mother." He turned to Noah. "You fit to move, son?" Noah pushed himself up with effort, grimacing. "Fit enough. I owe these people more than a report." Elias nodded once. "Then we go together." An hour later, the four of them, Ava, Noah, Elias, and Ranger, were moving through the forest toward the Frostline mining site. The blizzard had returned, slower but heavier, flakes spiraling like ash from a dying ski. The headlights from their snow-tracked utility vehicle carved narrow tunnels of light through the white darkness. Elias drove, his gloved hands steady on the wheel, the lines around his eyes deepened by the glow of the dashboard. Ava sat beside him, map spread across her knees. Noah rode in the back, Ranger's head resting against his leg, the steady weight grounding him against the tremors of pain that still rippled through his shoulder. When they reached the old mining perimeter, the wind dropped into a low howl. The Frostline facility loomed ahead, a sprawling skeleton of metal and ice, half buried beneath snowdrifts. The sign reading, "Frostline Industries, authorized personnel only," hung crooked, its paint faded to gray. Elias killed the engine. "We go on foot from here." They moved quietly, flashlights cutting thin paths through the storm. Ava led, her movements controlled, boots sinking noiselessly into the powder. Ranger trotted ahead, nose low, ears twitching. Noah kept his weapon drawn, his breath visible in the air. Ava found the service tunnel first, an old ventilation shaft leading into the mine, its entrance warped by decades of frost. "This connects to the main extraction chamber," she said, brushing snow from the metal. "We'll come in behind them." The tunnel was narrow and slick, lined with frozen stalactites that shimmered like glass. Their lights reflected in fractured rainbows off the ice. The air grew warmer as they descended, heavy with the scent of fuel and chemicals. When they emerged into the main chamber, the scene was almost surreal. Hundreds of drums stacked in neat rows, marked with hazard symbols, Frostline's dirty secret laid bare. At the center of it all stood a man in an immaculate charcoal overcoat, his silver hair slicked back, his features angular and handsome in a way that radiated cruelty. Damien Rourke, CEO of Frostline Industries. He turned slowly as they approached, his calm smile slicing through the cold air. "You must be the Delaney's. I was expecting you." Elias's jaw tightened. "You've been dumping poison into the aquifer for years. It ends tonight." Rourke tilted his head, his gray eyes glinting like steel. "On the contrary, Sheriff. It ends in about 10 seconds. He held up a phone, his thumb poised over a single button. "You see, if I can't control this town, I can erase it. Every barrel in this mine is wired to detonate." Noah raised his gun. "You won't get the chance." Rourke's smile widened. "You'd be amazed how fast a man can move when faced with extinction." For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then Ava's whisper cut through the storm outside. "Ranger, seize." The shepherd exploded into motion, a blur of black and silver fur. He lunged, teeth closing around Rourke's wrist with surgical precision. The phone flew from his hand, clattering across the ice. Rourke screamed, stumbling back as Noah charged, slamming him to the ground. Ava kicked the phone away and grabbed a pair of zip ties from her belt. Within seconds, Rourke was bound and his curses muffled by the roar of the wind outside. Elias exhaled heavily, his breath fogging the air. "You always had a knack for timing," he said to his daughter. Ava glanced at Noah, who was catching his breath against the wall, his eyes reflecting the flickering emergency lights. "Couldn't have done it without them," she said softly, nodding toward him and the dog. Noah met her gaze, a faint, weary smile crossing his face. "Guess we both needed a new mission." Outside, the blizzard raged, but its sound had changed. The wind no longer howled like grief. It sang, high and wild, as if the mountains themselves were exhaling. The poison was contained, the evidence preserved, and for the first time in years, Ava felt the world growing quiet inside her chest. She turned toward the exit, where the storm shimmered like a curtain of light. "Let's go home," she said. A week had passed since the Frostline raid, and Silver Ridge had awakened into peace. The storm that once clawed at the mountains had gentled into soft, drifting flakes. The air was sharp but kind, carrying the scent of pine and chimney smoke. The town square, usually quiet this time of year, was alive again. Strings of colored lights looped across lampposts, glowing like captured stars. Children ran laughing between the stalls, their boots crunching through the snow. At the heart of it all stood a towering Christmas tree dusted with fresh powder, its branches glittering beneath the pale sun. Officer Noah Briggs stood near the tree, one arm still bound in a sling, his uniform pressed but faintly wrinkled from use. The wound on his shoulder ached when the cold sank too deep, but he didn't mind. It was a reminder, not of pain, but of purpose. His face had regained its warmth, the hard lines around his jaw softened. He still carried that quiet gravity, but there was a light behind his gray eyes now, one that hadn't been there before. Beside him stood Captain Ava Delaney, no longer in tactical gear, but in a heavy charcoal coat, her auburn hair tucked beneath a woolen beanie. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the wind, her blue eyes bright against the cold. For the first time in years, she wasn't scanning for threats, only for joy. There was something in her posture that had changed. The soldier's tension had melted away, leaving behind the steady confidence of a woman rediscovering what peace felt like. Between them sat Ranger, regal as ever, wearing a new collar, a sleek band of silver leather engraved with the words "Heart of Courage." His fur shimmered in the winter light, the silver streaks near his muzzle catching the glow. Around him, children threw snowballs that crumbled harmlessly against his sides, and the shepherd only wagged his tail, indulging their laughter. The church bells began to ring, their sound echoing off the snowy rooftops. Ava glanced up, smiling faintly. "It feels like the whole town is breathing again," she said. "It's because of you," Noah replied quietly. Ava shook her head, brushing snow from her sleeve. "Because of us. I couldn't have done any of this alone." She paused, looking toward Ranger, who had settled back into a sitting guard position, chest broad, gaze steady. "Or without him." Noah chuckled softly. He's getting used to being famous. I heard Marge from the hospital baked him cookies shaped like bones. She did, Ava said, laughing. He buried them behind the station. Old habits. For a moment, the two fell silent, letting the world around them speak, the hum of conversation, the jingling of sleigh bells, the wind dancing through the pines. Ava tilted her head toward him. Does it still hurt? Only when you're not looking at me, Noah said, lips curling into a half smile. She laughed, a sound that melted the cold like sunlight through. Frost. You never stop with the lines, do you? Not when they make you laugh like that. Ava's eyes softened, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know, I used to hate the snow. Really? It reminded me of silence, of things buried and forgotten. But now, she looked out at the falling flakes, catching one on her glove. Now it feels like forgiveness. Noah stepped closer, their breath mingling in the chill air. Maybe that's what it's for, he said. A clean slate. Before she could answer, a familiar voice called out behind them. You two planning to stand there all day, or are you going to help me hang these? It was Captain Elias Delaney, Ava's father, bundled in a thick brown coat and scarf. His silver beard glistened with frost, and despite his stern tone, his eyes sparkled with mischief. In one gloved hand, he held a tangled string of golden lights, and in the other, a steaming mug of coffee. Ava grinned. You shouldn't be lifting anything heavier than that mug, Dad. I'm your commanding officer again today, remember? Elias retorted, though his voice carried nothing but pride. And don't think I didn't see you two hiding behind that tree when the mayor tried to start the speeches. Noah smirked. We were conducting surveillance, standard protocol. Uh-huh, Elias said dryly, handing Noah the lights. Then make yourself useful, officer. The town doesn't decorate itself. As Noah started toward the tree, Ava caught her father's glance, the kind that said 1,000 things at once. He gave a small nod, barely perceptible, but it warmed her heart. He had seen her broken before. Now he saw her whole again. When the last light was hung, the mayor, a round, cheerful man named Harold Bixby, with a booming laugh and a red scarf that never seemed to stay straight, stepped up to the small podium. This year, he announced, we light this tree not only for Christmas, but for courage, for the men and women who faced the storm when the rest of us were safe at home. His gaze drifted to Ava, Noah, and Ranger. And for a four-legged hero who reminded us that faith doesn't always come with words. The crowd erupted in applause. Ranger tilted his head at the sound, then barked once, a clear, proud sound that drew laughter and cheers. Children clapped, adults smiled, and for the first time since Frostline's shadow had fallen over Silver Ridge, the air was filled with hope instead of fear. When the tree lights flickered to life, casting a golden glow across the square, Ava leaned her head lightly against Noah's shoulder. You think this peace will last? She asked softly. He looked down at her, snowflakes settling on her lashes. I think it will if we fight for it, he said. Together. The church bells chimed again, their echoes rolling across the white hills. Ranger lay down between them, his eyes half closed, content. Funny, Ava murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I'd never trust the cold again, but here we are. Noah smiled, turning his face slightly toward hers. Maybe winter isn't cold, he said. Maybe it's just waiting for the right people to warm it. And as the snow began to fall again, slow, silent, and endless, they stood beneath the glowing lights, shoulder to shoulder, bound not by duty or war or pain, but by something far greater, the quiet, steady miracle of love reborn in the heart of winter. As the snow fell over Silver Ridge, people realized it wasn't just winter. It was a miracle. Sometimes God doesn't appear through grand wonders or heavenly voices, but through small acts of courage, kindness, and faith between human hearts. Ava, Noah, and Ranger prove that miracles still live among us, in every breath we take, in every risk made for love, and in every moment we choose hope over fear. In our everyday lives, each of us carries a little Silver Ridge within, a place where faith can melt the coldest night, where second chances are born, and where light always finds its way back. If you believe courage and faith can change the world, share this story. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and help spread light where it's needed most. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He keep your hearts warm through every storm and remind you that no matter how cold the world may seem, His love will always be the fire that never fades.